During a family vacation, my guardians told me to sleep in the car so my cousin could have the room. I smirked and said, "That's okay, because I actually booked the entire floor." Their faces went pale when the manager walked in. I, 24M, never thought a family vacation would become the moment I finally stood up to the people who raised me. But sometimes life has a funny way of forcing your hand. My guardians took me in when I was 8 after my parents died in a car accident. They weren't bad people, but they made it crystal clear that their biological son was the golden child, and I was just the obligation they had to fulfill. For 16 years, I watched my cousin get everything while I got the leftovers, the smaller room, the older clothes, the backseat treatment in every family decision. The vacation to the mountain resort was supposed to be a celebration of my cousin graduating college. I had just landed my first big promotion at the tech company where I'd been grinding for 2 years, but nobody seemed to care about that. My guardians booked what they thought was a standard family suite, expecting we'd all cram together like we always did. What they didn't know was that I'd been planning this moment for months. 3 weeks before the trip, I called the resort directly. I explained that I wanted to surprise my family and asked about upgrading our reservation. The manager told me the entire top floor was available, 5 luxury suites with a private lounge area. It cost me nearly 3 months' salary, but I booked it under my name and credit card. I also made sure to register myself as the primary guest with full authority over the floor. The drive up was typical. My cousin complained about everything while my guardians catered to his every whim. I sat in the back, quietly watching the mountain scenery and thinking about what was coming. We arrived at the resort around sunset. The place was even more impressive than the photos. A massive stone and timber structure nestled against the mountainside, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the valley below. My guardians seemed nervous about the cost, but I assured them everything was handled. At check-in, the desk clerk looked confused when my guardian gave his name. She politely explained that the reservation was under a different name and asked him to wait while she made some calls. I stepped forward and provided my ID, watching as recognition dawned on her face. We rode the elevator to the top floor in silence. When the doors opened, my cousin's jaw dropped. The private lounge was stunning, leather furniture, a stone fireplace, and panoramic windows. 5 doors led to individual suites, each one larger than our entire house back home. My guardian turned to me with confusion written all over his face. He asked how this was possible, and I simply told him I'd taken care of the arrangements. My cousin immediately claimed he wanted the corner suite with the best view, and my guardian nodded approvingly. That's when I dropped the first bomb. I calmly explained that actually, there had been a small mix-up with the sleeping arrangements. Since the reservation was in my name and I was paying for everything, I had already assigned the rooms. My cousin would be staying in the car. The silence that followed was deafening. My guardian's face went through several color changes before he demanded to know what I meant. I explained that for 16 years, I'd been treated like a second-class family member. Every family trip, every holiday, every special occasion, I got whatever was left over after my cousin was taken care of. I told them I thought it was time my cousin experienced what that felt like. My cousin started protesting loudly, saying I couldn't be serious. My guardian backed him up, insisting that I was being ridiculous and that we were family. I nodded and agreed that we were family, which was exactly why I was giving my cousin the same treatment I'd received for over a decade. The argument escalated quickly. My guardian demanded I stop this nonsense and give my cousin a proper room. He reminded me of everything they'd done for me, how they'd taken me in when I had nowhere else to go. I listened quietly, then asked if he remembered the camping trip when I was 12, when they made me sleep in the tent while my cousin got the RV because he was afraid of bugs. I brought up the beach house rental when I was 15, where I slept on the couch for a week because my cousin needed his own space to decompress from school stress. I mentioned the ski lodge incident where I spent 3 nights in the lodge's common area because the room they booked only had 1 bed and my cousin needed his rest for the slopes. With each memory I recounted, their faces grew paler. They tried to justify each incident, claiming those were different circumstances, but I cut them off. I told them that tonight, my cousin could experience what I'd been experiencing my entire life with them. My cousin was furious now, demanding I give him a room or he'd call his parents. I reminded him that his parents were standing right there, and they were welcome to book him his own room if they wanted. I pulled out my phone and showed them the resort's current rates. $800 per night for the cheapest available room. My guardian's face went white when he saw the price. He tried a different approach, appealing to my sense of family loyalty. He said I was being petty and vindictive, that this wasn't who they raised me to be. I agreed that this wasn't who they raised me to be. They raised me to accept whatever scraps I was given and be grateful for it. That's when my cousin made his biggest mistake. He got in my face and told me I was nothing but a charity case who should be grateful they didn't dump me in foster care. He said I'd never be real family and that I was pathetic for trying to buy my way into respect. I smiled at him and told him he was absolutely right about one thing. I wasn't real family to them, which was why I felt completely comfortable treating him exactly how they'd treated me all these years. The room fell silent again. My guardian tried one more approach, asking what I wanted from them. I told him I didn't want anything anymore. For years, I'd wanted to feel like I belonged, like I mattered as much as my cousin did. But I'd finally realized that was never going to happen, and I was okay with that now. I explained that I'd booked this entire floor as a gift to myself, a celebration of finally accepting reality and moving forward with my life. They were welcome to enjoy the accommodations I provided, but the sleeping arrangements were non-negotiable. My cousin stormed toward one of the suite doors, declaring he was taking a room whether I liked it or not. I calmly told him the doors were keycard access only, and I had all the keys. That's when my guardian made his final play. He threatened to leave the resort entirely, taking my cousin with him. He said if I wanted to play these games, we could all just go home right now. I told him that was completely his choice, but the rooms were paid for whether they stayed or not. As if on cue, there was a knock at the lounge door. I opened it to find the resort manager, a distinguished woman in her 50s who'd been incredibly helpful during my planning calls. She asked if everything was satisfactory with the accommodations. I thanked her and mentioned that my family was just getting settled in. She nodded and then addressed my guardian directly, explaining that she'd received a call from the front desk about some confusion regarding the reservation. She wanted to clarify that I was the registered guest for the entire floor and had full authority over all access and arrangements. The manager continued, mentioning that if there were any issues with the current setup, the resort would be happy to help arrange alternative accommodations, though she should mention that they were completely booked for the weekend due to a wedding party. The nearest available rooms would be at a motel about 40 minutes down the mountain. My guardian's face went through another series of color changes. The manager asked if there was anything else she could help with, and I told her everything was perfect. She handed me her business card, mentioning that as our VIP guest, I should call her directly if we needed anything at all. After she left, the room was silent for a long moment. My cousin looked between his parents and me, clearly expecting them to fix this situation. My guardian stared at the business card in my hand, finally understanding that I held all the power here. I decided to throw them one small bone. I told them that my cousin could sleep in the lounge. The couch was actually quite comfortable, and it was certainly better than the car. I'd even provide him with pillows and blankets from one of the suites. My cousin started to protest, but my guardian cut him off. He asked what I wanted in return for giving my cousin a proper room. I told him I didn't want anything in return because this wasn't a negotiation. This was simply how things were going to be. I picked up my keycard and headed toward the corner suite, the one with the best view that my cousin had originally claimed. Before I closed the door, I turned back to them and said that room service was available until midnight, and everything was already charged to my account. I suggested they order whatever they wanted. Update 1. I woke up the next morning to angry voices in the lounge. Through my door, I could hear my cousin complaining loudly about his neck hurting from the couch. My guardian was trying to calm him down, but my cousin was having none of it. I took my time getting ready, enjoying the massive bathroom with its mountain view and rainfall shower. When I finally emerged, I found my cousin pacing angrily while my guardian sat looking defeated. My cousin immediately started demanding I give him a room, claiming he hadn't slept at all. I sympathized with him, mentioning that I'd had many sleepless nights over the years in various uncomfortable sleeping arrangements during family trips. I suggested he might want to take a nap later. My guardian asked if we could talk privately. I agreed, and we stepped out onto the private balcony. He tried a more emotional approach, talking about family and forgiveness. He said he was sorry if I'd felt overlooked over the years, but that was never their intention. I listened patiently, then asked him if he remembered my high school graduation. He looked confused, so I reminded him. My cousin had a baseball game the same day, so they attended his game instead of my ceremony. I graduated valedictorian, but they missed it because my cousin was playing JV baseball. His face fell as the memory came back. He tried to explain that my cousin had been really nervous about the game, but I cut him off. I told him that was exactly my point. My cousin's minor anxiety about a JV baseball game was more important than my once-in-a-lifetime achievement. I explained that I wasn't angry anymore, just done. This weekend wasn't about revenge. It was about finally accepting that we had different definitions of family, and that was okay. We rejoined my cousin in the lounge, where I announced my plans for the day. The resort had an excellent spa, and I'd booked myself a full day of treatments. I suggested they explore the hiking trails or maybe visit the nearby town. My cousin sarcastically asked if I was going to let them use one of the cars, since I was apparently in charge of everything now. I reminded him that we'd all driven up together in my guardian's car, so that was still entirely up to them. The day passed peacefully. I enjoyed my spa treatments while they apparently spent the day hiking and exploring. When I returned that evening, I found them both looking tired but less hostile. My guardian had clearly been thinking during the day. He approached me and said he wanted to understand better. He asked me to tell him honestly how I'd felt growing up with them. I considered brushing off the question, but something in his tone made me think he might actually be ready to listen. So I told him. I explained how it felt to always be the afterthought, the one whose needs came last. I described watching my cousin get new clothes while I got hand-me-downs, not because money was tight, but because my cousin's appearance was considered more important. I talked about birthday parties where my cousin got elaborate celebrations while mine were simple affairs, always scheduled around his activities. I told him about the college fund they'd set up for my cousin while telling me I'd need to figure out my own education financing. I mentioned the family photos displayed throughout their house, dozens of pictures of my cousin at various ages, and maybe 3 or 4 that included me. As I spoke, I watched my guardian's expression change. He tried to interrupt several times with explanations or justifications, but I asked him to just listen. I finished by telling him that the hardest part wasn't the material differences, it was the constant message that I mattered less. That my feelings, my achievements, my presence in their family was always secondary to my cousins. When I finished, my guardian was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said he never realized how their actions had affected me. I told him I believed that was true, which was part of the problem. Update 2. The second night, my cousin tried a different approach. Instead of anger, he attempted guilt. He came to my suite door and asked if we could talk. I let him in, curious about his new strategy. He sat down and told me he was sorry I felt left out growing up. He said he never asked to be treated differently, and he didn't realize it was hurting me. He seemed genuine, so I listened. Then he asked if I could please give him a room for the remaining nights. He promised that when we got home, he'd talk to his parents about treating me more fairly. He said we could start over and be real brothers. I appreciated the effort, but I told him that ship had sailed. I explained that I wasn't looking for apologies or promises of future fairness. I was past needing their validation or acceptance. He pressed harder, asking what it would take for me to forgive them. I told him there was nothing to forgive because I'd chosen to let go of my resentment. This weekend wasn't about punishment, it was about closure. My cousin got frustrated and asked why I was being so stubborn. I reminded him that just yesterday, he called me a charity case and told me I'd never be real family. I asked him if he remembered saying that. He tried to backtrack, claiming he was just angry and didn't mean it. I told him that anger often reveals truth, and I was grateful for his honesty. It had helped me finally accept reality. The conversation ended with him storming out, muttering about how I'd changed and become cold. I didn't disagree with him. The third day brought a new development. My guardian received a call from his sister, my cousin's aunt, who was apparently supposed to join us for the last 2 days of the vacation. She was driving up and expected to stay in our family suite. My guardian looked panicked as he explained the situation to me. I told him that was unfortunate, but the floor was at capacity. If his sister wanted to join us, she'd need to book her own accommodations. He begged me to give up one of the suites so she could stay. I reminded him that just 3 days ago, he was perfectly comfortable with me sleeping in the car. I suggested his sister might enjoy the authentic camping experience. That's when he finally broke down. He admitted that they'd always treated me differently, and he was sorry. He said they'd been wrong, and he wanted to make it right. He offered to pay me back for the entire vacation if I'd just give his sister a room. I told him I didn't want his money. I explained that this wasn't a transaction, It was a lesson. For 3 days, my cousin had experienced what I'd lived with for 16 years. One weekend of discomfort wasn't going to kill him. His sister arrived that evening, a loud woman who immediately started complaining about the mix-up with the rooms. She demanded to know why her nephew was sleeping on a couch when there were clearly 5 suites available. I introduced myself and explained that I was the registered guest for the floor. She looked confused and asked my guardian to clarify the situation. Watching him try to explain without admitting how they'd planned to treat me was almost entertaining. She turned to me and declared that this was ridiculous, that families should stick together and share resources. I agreed completely and mentioned that I'd learned that lesson from them over the years. When she realized I wasn't budging, she tried to pull rank as the elder family member. I politely reminded her that she wasn't actually my family member at all. She was my guardian's sister, and I was just the kid they'd taken in. The honesty of that statement seemed to hit everyone in the room. My guardian looked stricken, my cousin appeared uncomfortable, and his aunt seemed to finally understand the dynamics at play. She ended up booking a room at the motel down the mountain, complaining loudly about the inconvenience and expense. Before she left, she pulled my guardian aside for what appeared to be a heated conversation. Update 3. The final morning brought an unexpected development. I woke to find a handwritten letter slipped under my door. It was from my guardian, and it was longer than any conversation we'd ever had. In the letter, he acknowledged everything I'd said about how they'd treated me. He admitted that they'd never fully accepted me as their son, always seeing me as their obligation rather than their child. He wrote about his own fears and insecurities, how having a traumatized 8-year-old suddenly join their family had overwhelmed them. He apologized for the birthday parties, the college fund, the sleeping arrangements, and dozens of other incidents I'd never even mentioned. He said talking to his sister had opened his eyes to how obvious their favoritism had been to everyone around them. The letter ended with an offer. He wanted to set up a college fund for me equal to what they'd saved for my cousin. He wanted to include me properly in family photos and traditions going forward. He asked if I'd be willing to give them a chance to do better. I found him in the lounge, looking exhausted. My cousin was still asleep on the couch, and we spoke quietly so as not to wake him. I thanked him for the letter and told him I appreciated his honesty. I said I could see that he was genuinely sorry and that he wanted to change. Then I told him it was too late. I explained that I was 24 years old and had spent the last several years building my own life and identity separate from their family. I'd learned to find validation and belonging elsewhere. I didn't need them to accept me anymore because I'd accepted myself. I told him that his offer was generous, but I'd already put myself through college and was doing well in my career. I didn't need their money or their belated attempts at inclusion. He asked what he could do to make things right. I told him the truth, nothing. Some damage can't be undone, and some relationships can't be repaired. That didn't make him a terrible person, and it didn't mean I hated him. It just meant we'd missed our window. I suggested that instead of trying to fix things with me, he should focus on understanding why he'd made the choices he had. Maybe that would help him be better in future relationships. My cousin woke up during our conversation and immediately started complaining about his back. I told him I was sorry he was uncomfortable, and I meant it. I didn't enjoy seeing him suffer. I just needed him to understand what I'd experienced. As we packed up to leave, my guardian made one final attempt. He said that despite everything, I was still family to them and always would be. I told him I appreciated that, but family was more than just words or legal obligations. Family was how you treated people when it mattered. The drive home was quiet. My cousin slept in the back seat while my guardian and I made polite conversation about work and the weather. It felt like talking to a distant acquaintance, which I suppose was accurate. When we reached their house, I helped unload the luggage and said my goodbyes. My guardian asked if I'd stay for dinner, but I declined. I had my own life to get back to. As I drove away, I felt something I hadn't expected: peace. For 16 years, I'd carried the weight of trying to earn their love and acceptance. This weekend had finally freed me from that burden. I'd proven to myself that I didn't need their validation to have worth. I'd shown them exactly what their treatment had felt like. Most importantly, I'd closed a chapter of my life that had been holding me back. My phone buzzed with a text from my guardian as I pulled into my apartment complex. He'd sent a photo of my cousin's college graduation, asking if I wanted a copy for my own place. I looked at the image, my cousin in his cap and gown, surrounded by proud family members. I was nowhere to be seen because I hadn't been invited. I deleted the message without responding. Some chapters, once closed, should stay that way. The next week, I started looking into volunteering with organizations that help kids in foster care. If I couldn't change my own past, maybe I could help ensure other kids didn't feel as alone as I had. That felt like a much better use of my energy than trying to fix relationships that were broken from the start.